The following podcast may be explicit. Shedcast presents Adventures from the Shed, a tabletop RPG podcast. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com. Welcome to the Dungeons & Dragons Starter Set and Review bonus episode. We'll make room for you at our gaming table as we take a look at the 4 parts of the D&D Starter Set and recount our favorite moments of the Lost Mines of Phandelver adventure. Enjoy the podcast. Hi, and welcome to Adventures from the Shed. We're doing a special bonus episode here. We're going to take a few minutes and talk about how we felt about the Dungeons & Dragons Starter Set. We just finished part 4 of that set a little while ago during a long recording session. I'm Joe. I was a Dungeon Master for the Dungeons & Dragons Starter Set, and we are going to be snacking on some food while we record this, so excuse the crunches and the people who are talking with their mouth full like Mickey's about to.
Hey. Hi, everyone. I'm Mickey. I played Bree Greenbottle in this adventure, which was the rogue of the group. She was also a halfling rogue, and we found out very quickly that she had questionable
morals
and judgment. So, hi, everyone.
Hi, Ferris Dustbringer here. I played the erudite wizard, and it was definitely interesting. I like how they did the magic the way they did it. I like it. Passing it on over to Kurt Schumacher.
All right. Hey, this is Kurt. I played Thorin Stormstriker, the Dwarven Cleric for the starter set. Have lots of thoughts about it, but really, really enjoyed it. And I'm going to throw it over to Sir Walter Mike.
Mike Robertson here. I played Sir Walter Moss for this adventure. Ready to talk about it. Bonus.
All right, so how we're going to do this, I'm going to do a quick recap of what each of the parts were, and then we'll get everyone's opinion, whoever wants to interject, what they liked about it, maybe cool things their character had done at the time. And we're going to start with what part 1, the title of that was Goblin Arrows. That was where everybody had met. The group got together. We learned who each character was, reading the stuff from the starter sheets. The character sheets from the starter set, got a little bit of a feel of what the characters' motivations were at the time. The characters got together. They were on a caravan to go to Phandalin, and on the way there, they saw that goblins had ambushed another party and defeated those goblins, headed down the goblin trail, found their hideout, and defeated Clarg in that hideout. Pretty handily, mind you. And that was the end of part 1. Who remembers something fun about that?
Well, the funny thing is, we recorded the first part of part 1 twice because
yes.
I think we had some recording issues or the levels were messed up.
I take the blame for that.
And in the first time we recorded it, we mopped the floors with the goblins like they didn't last through one round.
Yeah, I think it was like a turn and a half.
And the second time we played, I think they downed 2 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it took an hour.
And it took forever. Yeah, it took an hour to do that. So that was really cool. And I really liked Clarg's personality in that. Like, Joe actually added some personality that he had this dog and his little goblin helpers really didn't like him. So it made that battle more interesting than a little boss battle might have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fate of the dice is interesting. Like, it's the randomness of the dice. I mean, like you said, the first time I think it was one round and like maybe they got one extra attack on the next round. We whopped them up, and then in that section, anyways, my favorite thing that I saw was Mr. Animal Husbandry over here. Sir Walter Moss managed to, I don't know, T-bone the dogs or.
Yeah.
Whatever you did.
He was able to do that Crocodile Dundee.
He pacified them.
Yeah, I just... everyone was going, what are you doing? And I'm like, it says on the sheet that I have +1 in animal handling, so let's give it a try.
So after that, we went on to what is part 2 in the adventure. I'll give you the quick recap of that. Part 2 was where we found Phandalin. The title of part 2 is actually just Phandalin. So we found the city, town, went into the town, and that's where we had discovered that we could use that old MMO quest log type of thing, where we had all of these side quests and the main character story quests. We found different quests like the Banshee's Bargain, finding Cragmaw Castle, Orc Trouble, finding Iarno, and essentially this was the part of the story or the part of the adventure where we got all the side quests and started meeting all of the NPCs. And it ended with us confronting the Red Brands, going to the Red Brand hideout, and defeating them. That's where Glassstaff was. Who remembers some good stuff about that?
I liked the way it's set up, and this speaks to how the starter set, I think, is set up, because at that part is where we found kind of like where the characters all intersected, if you will, which is nice, because you're not forced into a group of people that you don't know. Everyone has kind of goals, and they intersect. So it makes it flow a little better.
You mean like specifically like Bree was looking for Holly Thornton?
Correct.
And everyone
and there was a
going along.
reason to.
Yep.
And I also like the fact that there are options for all these little side quests. So if someone just buys a starter set, they can do all these little side adventures and really get their money's worth.
In fact, the little side things for the characters was like the reason to talk to them. Like there was whole chains of side quests that we could have picked up had we like talked to everyone in town, which we of course did not do, but we were able to talk to like 3 or 4 different people and get different things to do. And there was a lot of stuff we could have done if we would have spent more time in there too.
Yeah, there's a lot of value when you think about the fact that this is a retail $19 product that you can get on Amazon now for $11. I mean, we played the heck out of it here, and we were intentionally moving quickly through parts. I mean, there are whole side quests we did not even touch. If this was your home game, you could have played this for months if you'd wanted to. So it's an incredible value. I really like the way it was structured, too, as a starter set, because I felt like part 1 was really designed for a new player who had either never played before or hadn't been played in a long time. And while we did have a really hard time with the goblins, I don't think it was designed to play that way. I think we just had some crazy rolls.
Like JJ said, the die rolls. It's so random.
But that first part is, it's relatively linear. It's clear where you need to go, and it's increasing level of difficulty on the combat. Then part 2, you go to essentially an open sandbox. Go where, it's a world, but go wherever you want, talk to whoever you want, and then pick from that. And then towards the end, 3 and to a greater degree 4, you get into kind of a classic D&D dungeon crawl. So I feel like in one, I don't know what it is, 30-page adventure, they've given a real overview of kind of here's everything D&D has to offer in little snippets. You can be diplomatic, you can be charismatic, you can have a ton of combat. I like the variety in the starter set.
By far for me, my favorite part of part 2, my favorite section was, can I shoot him in the leg? I want to shoot him in the knee. Let me shoot him in the knee. I'm going to shoot him in the knee. Bree hiding and confronting the Red Brands in front of the Sleeping Giant tap house after soundly whooping them. We had Greg as the prisoner, and she shot him in the knee.
For fun.
And then wanted to finish him off, but Ferris said no.
Ferris said no, let him go. And was proven
and
right.
And then when we got to the hideout, Greg came running back in, and the fate of the dice.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes like
it was
the dice
a
tell
crit, I think, right?
The dice tell them stories, not just a crit, sir. Not just a crit. It was max damage on both rolls.
Nice.
And it does. Like I truly believe sometimes the dice just tell the story themselves. Like, I hate being proven wrong. Crit, max damage 16 right up the wazoo.
Nice. Yeah, I thought for myself, I kind of liked the way the Red Brand hideout was structured. That it was this old cellar underneath a big manor, and they kind of had things staged where, although you guys didn't necessarily have the quest to find the prisoners, the woman and her 2 kids, you did find them and you escorted them out. The fighting the Nothic there, I liked the idea of when Greg, the Red Brand prisoner, when he was being interrogated, he mentioned the eye monster, and that spawned the, oh my gosh, we're going to find a beholder, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
High hopes.
Right, and it turned out to be the Nothic, and that monster itself was kind of a letdown. He should have been able to beat you guys a little bit, but It was interesting to me the way they had that set up.
Yeah, I think if I were listening, some of the fights that should have been huge fights were incredibly easy in this.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's just the roll of the dice. But I mean, we had some fights like Last Staff that should have been a bigger fight than it was, or some of the stuff in Part 4 that we dispatched fairly easily. But that's the way it goes.
But was it all dice rolling, or is it the way these characters are set up?
I think a lot of it was, and I want to mention that too. We had just talked about this in between finishing up Part 4 and recording this. We had talked a little bit about how that system, the way the system is set up, the characters essentially have a high enough armor class to start that it makes the monsters in the starter set hard. It makes it harder for them to hit. So almost all of the monsters we had here had a +4 or +5 to hit. And with characters having armor classes 14 plus, that means a 10 would only hit 2 of the characters, and then the other 2 having an 18 armor class, or 17, depending on where we started. That meant I'm rolling a 13 or 14 just to hit somebody, which is a lot more than the characters had to roll. The highest armor class on most of the bad guys was the bugbears. If they had their shield, they had a 16. So they couldn't compete. Most of the bad guys had a 12 to 14 armor class, which is only as good as the worst armor class of the characters.
Now, with that being said, though, like the characters who had the highest armor class were proportionally the characters who got hit the most.
Yeah.
So you have to give them that high armor class to offset the fact that they're going to be taking approximately 80% of the hits.
And I would say, to my recollection, it was either Thor or Moss that was on the ground most often.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The only time I got underground because when my dumbass decided to run up and cast Burning Hands.
If I were balancing it, I would have taken down like the bugbears and maybe the hobgoblins a little bit and upped the bosses a little bit, just in terms of excitement. I felt like we spent a lot of time like on the 4 spiders, and then the drow, Black Spider himself was very easy, and I felt like that happened several times. But that's a minor quibble. I mean,
now see, if it was me playing D&D normally, I would roll behind a screen,
right,
and I would have made things a little more tense, right, as it were. As we played it, though, every one of my rolls was out in the open. And for that matter, the hit points of the monsters are out in the open, and the people sitting closer knew when they were about to die. But let's move on to Part 3. Part 3 of the adventure was called The Spider's Web, and this is where you get farther into knowing who the Black Spider is, which essentially we kind of did, but kind of didn't. Pretty much figured out it was a drow. We thought that's who it was at the end. But Part 3 for us was going and talking to the Banshee and finding out where Cragmaw Castle was. We also went to the Old Owl Well to meet the necromancer there with his zombies, who also led us to Wyvern Tor, where we finished off the goblins. Not goblins, orcs there, and then ended at Cragmaw Castle, getting through there and rescuing Gundren. And that was the end of 3. One thing I want to point out, I remember, and it seems some of my favorite moments are the Bree moments, but I remember outside of Wyvern Tor, outside of that cave, she did that one-shot, one-kill on the scout outside, which allowed you guys to get up there for a surprise round. And one of the reasons that turned out to be pretty cool was there was a description for it right in the book. If the outside guard can be taken out silently, then the characters get an advantage. And I thought that was pretty cool that it worked exactly that way. Who else had good memories from Part 3?
I'm going to kind of float my own boat here, but shock and awe. I teleported up and just blew them up.
That was really good.
Right. I keep thinking of that as that scenario or that instance as one of those cartoon things where in the cartoon a fire blast hits and you see the outline of the guy on the scorched wall. I'm thinking, Ferris popped into this room, this guard tower, blasted Burning Hands, and now there's 2 goblin outlines on the wall.
Yeah. I think Part 3 was where I gave up on healing and just kicked a bunch of butt and had like 8 or 9 kills, which the cleric was awesome.
That was my favorite, when you were like, all of a sudden you gave up totally on healing, and then like you went down, and all of a sudden it was like, "Oh, Mothmar doing, please rescue me from my fate."
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I didn't have to do a lot of healing because the big guys weren't getting the really horrible hits on us. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were definitely times where some of us went down, and I think
was maybe it was the goblins in part 1 that was
Yes.
pretty desperate. But we did not have a huge sense of urgency for like we're truly going to die at many points in the.
Yeah,
Well,
I
see,
thought it was interesting.
all
Just to that note, I think maybe, and I'm just thinking this now, maybe our expectations later for danger were set early on when goblins were essentially killing you guys, but the saving throws stopped the death, right?
And it's interesting. Sorry, but I know not a criticism, but a comment about 5th edition D&D generally is that first characters are very squishy. And that second level you can survive, and then third level is where things get really good, and you get a lot of powers, which I think we all saw. Third level is a big jump up, but first level, not just in the starter set, but in the everything, it's pretty squishy characters.
All the fights that were really hairy had an environmental factor. So if you think back to Clark, we only had 2 people up there, and then when I got
because
up,
the most dexterous person couldn't get up the
Yeah,
gravity chute.
the DPS couldn't climb the damn wall, and so we had. It's just all the fights that got really really hairy were all the ones that had some kind of outside environmental factor shaping the battlefield to the advantage of the monsters. Because the player characters are always going to have an advantage because the player characters, as a general rule, we're going to focus one monster at a time, take it down, and then eventually the numbers, so many times I've seen fights where the beginning, like when I'm DMing, and people are like, "Oh my god, how are we going to survive this? You're a butthole for making us do this," and then all of a sudden the tide changes. You can see the hope in everyone's faces when they know that the end's in goal.
Yeah.
But all the fights that were really hairy all had an environmental factor outside of it.
So is that interesting that that's what turned the tide for the monsters? I mean, the fact that it had to be an outside influence to make it hairy? Like, my point is, I mean, it's good. I'm not knocking the game at all. I'm just wondering if maybe it could be a little more balanced.
Well, that's the campaign design. They didn't give you, you kept checking for traps.
Yeah.
How many times were there traps?
Never. I never went across
Exactly.
it. So,
And there's another thing, too, that I have seen in published adventures before that they don't really address in this. And I think it may be because it would put too much on a starting GM. But a lot of pre-published adventures and in the rule books, it'll tell you that if something's going too easy for the characters, up the challenge rating, add another monster, do something like that. The starter set doesn't do that. So... and also consider that this could have 5 characters in it. There wouldn't have been a change in monsters. There isn't an addition for more characters or subtraction for less. So I think in that way, it's probably a good start because as it was, people had to be saved from the brink of death multiple times over this adventure. So from levels 1 to 4, everybody had a chance of dying. I think everybody was out at least once.
Yes.
All right. So in that respect, I think it was at least adequately dangerous.
Yeah.
But I felt like those big fights, there wasn't a lot of tension.
You're right.
But if you also think about it in terms of the scope of the world, like I had a ton of fun with this adventure, but this is not an epic encounter in the scale of things. This is a little frontier town with a little mission that was important to the local folks. But, I mean, is this even on the radar in Neverwinter or farther up the coast?
You guys will be remembered fondly at this section of the Sword Coast.
We will, but one of the things I liked about it was there were seeds planted for this is a much bigger world, and there are more adventures to come. And there were explicit seeds, which you've mentioned to us, like the map in Part 4. But there are also, I went back and read the parts after we finished in the adventure, and like in Part 2 where you go and meet the different people, they actually say things like, the guy who owned the orchard, he's drawn to people who want to support good and order. And so if you do his mission and then come back, he might invite one of the party members to join his brotherhood.
because he's part of a group.
And so that happens on 3 or 4 different times. And I don't know if that ties into I can't remember if they're calling them factions or what they're calling them in D&D encounters, but there are groups. If those are those groups or something different. But there's this sense that there's this world beyond there. So this is just the first step.
And as part of that step,
I mean, in part 3 specifically, when we got to the Cragmaw Castle, I like the challenge, but I also I got this feeling when we hit there that we hit Cragmaw Castle like a well-oiled machine.
Oh yeah,
and we would hit room to room, and and it was it had that good feeling that it should that we'd been adventuring for a little bit, and now we were going to clean house when we got in here, and we even blocked the bugbear thing from killing
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah.
him several times, and
We
that
stopped
was
the doppelganger from running away.
and got him. So
we were like SEAL Team 6 coming
Yeah.
in.
We
They're like,
were.
clear,
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah, we were.
we like clear one room at a time, and it was really nice.
I agree. That was pretty cool. It was especially the beginning when we talked about where Ferris kind of teleported
Shucking
in,
off.
blasted the goblins, and then so like the beginning of it to me was like Ferris and his supporting cast, and so he had blasted those goblins and then blasted some more, and then put his flaming sphere in the doorway and was
Well,
burning
I iced
them
the
up.
door first just to
And
make
it
sure it
iced
wouldn't
the
get
door.
opened.
Right.
Was it
So he
part-
had all of these spectacular things, and everyone else was just mopping the floor behind him. Right.
I think it was part 3 while Ferris was doing that my spiritual weapon missed 6 times in a row.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
First time I ever cast that, and it missed 6 in a
So
row.
there's this hobgoblin here with half a hit point left. I swing at him, you miss. I swing at him, you miss.
And then his Thor's big weapon was the guiding bolt, and he never landed it.
I think
He
that
never
was a
landed
constant
it.
Guiding
miss.
bolt at first level is like 4d6 or 4d. I think it's
That's
4d6 damage, and it's cast as a second level. It's 5d6 damage, and
But it has
I
to hit.
I always missed
It's a
it.
good thing you didn't need all those d6s. You only have one. I mean,
Good point.
so that brought us to 4 after saving Gundren at the end of 3 from the Cragmaw Castle. Part 4 is called Wave Echo Cave, and Gundren had his map, showed you guys how to get there. Thank you for bringing him back to Phandalin, and you are off on your way to the Wave Echo Cave. And to me, Part 4 is just 100% Dungeons and Dragons
Yes.
dungeon crawl. It is everything that you think of when you just get together and you go through a dungeon. Now, we did, for the sake of expediency, we only went through the parts that we needed to, and we did not do the whole completionist attitude of getting every square inch of the map finished. Because of that, we missed a couple of things. However, I kind of like the balance of it, the way it worked out. And we did get all the way through, found the Black Spider, defeated him, and brought peace and prosperity to Phandalin and the Wave Echo Cave. And we just recorded most of this one today. Actually, all of it, for that
All of
matter.
it today.
What do you guys think? How did that one end up?
I love the old school dungeon crawls. Like some people that they'd rather be out in the world. I love just plowing. I could have played that probably for another 2 and cleared out the whole thing.
Agreed.
But I liked it. And the end
I wanted
part,
to see the flame skull.
yeah, at the end part with the doppelganger, I should have seen it coming, but I definitely did not see
That was
it
a nice
coming,
twist.
and that was a nice twist.
yeah.
I
I
love
didn't see
that.
it coming until he barreled into me.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not
That's
Nundro.
not nice. No, that was
See,
my favorite
that's the
part.
kind of thing I would have done, and I was so happy they wrote it into it, because that way other people can play something like that. And it's just, since he escaped you guys from Area 18, he went in and pretended to be the dwarf, who was actually locked up in the next room. And the whole point is, if he can't get you guys to surrender, then he's going to pretend to surrender and then get you at your most vulnerable moment, which is breaking out of a web right in front of him and his ally, and boom.
We were pushed up on time on that last episode. The way it's written, when you finish there, I mean, is that the end, or do they expect you to go back into Phandalin and talk to everyone? Or I'm just curious. No, you're done.
That's when the training wheels come off, huh?
Training
That's when
wheels
the
come
DM
off.
has to start
That's what
ad-libbing.
I'm chewing while Kurt's asking me a question. What it really says is, now that you've cleared that, that's a safe area for you if you want to explore the rest. And then you go back to Phandalin and you're the heroes.
Gotcha. So other than just kind of going out through some of the other rooms, we didn't miss anything at the end, or nothing happens in town special other than us being heroes.
That's correct. You didn't miss anything.
They throw a little parade.
They
But it's
throw
a
a
little
little
parade
parade.
because
Just a little
it's a
one?
little town.
Yeah, it's very
Because I'm a
little.
little dwarf.
It's
There's
like
like-
2 blocks.
That little dwarf, that little halfling.
We've got a little halfling. It's all good.
Yeah, and there's a guy selling cotton candy. That's it. Nothing else. You get nothing.
I'd have to say, I thought this was I mean, there were things that we would tweak about it, but for a starter set, which you have to think of as a beginner box, it's the equivalent
Exactly.
of a beginner box. I thought this was a great adventure. Great adventure. And to be honest, I mean, I'm reading Horde of the Dragon Queen, I told you guys on one of the breaks, which is kind of the first part of the big year-long adventure that Encounters is doing. And my inclination is I would actually much rather play this starter set with a group of players than I would that. I just think this is a more interesting, more variety, and a better introduction to D&D.
So let's take a few minutes and talk about how we felt on the starter set as a whole. Like Kurt just said, I'll mention I've had a lot of criticisms and a few praises throughout. What I would mention from the DM side, I really like the way they set it up as far as the DM learning through each part to take a little more responsibility, a little more work. And by the end of it, you're running it as a regular D&D session where you're assigning experience based on the monsters that were killed or any special thing that happens. But in part one, you finish all of part one and get a lump of experience at the end. So they didn't really split it up. So in that way, it progressed good. I had some critiques about their layouts of the dungeons and the NPCs. But in essence, everything you need is in the book. I didn't really have to make anything up. As me, there were plenty of spots where I wanted to say, it's not in the book, but I want to let you do it anyway. Whereas a starter DM could just say, it's not in the book, let's do something different. Right? You don't have to make it up like I do. You can just play what's in the book. If your only chance of opening the chest is a DC 20 roll with Thieves' Tools, then that's it. And when you guys said, let's just bust it open, I said, well, in the book, they don't have that option. There isn't a DC or how much damage or what its armor class is, so you can't. And that's the way a starter DM could play it without having to make stuff up.
Right.
I think my favorite part of this whole thing is the way we level up. Because I remember when I first, and again, speaking as a novice player, I remember starting with 4th edition, and leveling up was always very difficult for me. Because you gain all these new powers, and now I had new cards that I had to remember and all this stuff. I like this system of leveling up better.
And I was still reminding you.
Yeah, no, you
about
were
stuff.
reminding. You always
But
remind
I
me.
remind everybody. I play everyone's class. That's my foible. But as far I mean, I'm kind of like harping on our broken chord here, but we really do it's a great starter set. I can't fault it at all because the only thing I would include in this, the only thing I would like for it is more environmental factors. Like I said before, there was little to no traps. I think there was one pit trap outside the Goblin's King in the first section.
Yep.
And
there was a hallway trap somewhere. There's a
true,
long hallway.
you're right. There was that trap there. But there was a couple secret doors. I like that. But like some of the stuff, it felt like we could have gone a little bit more.
Although
Just a little bit more, just a little bit something extra, if we had SEAL Team 6, the chapel more, scaled the wall, coming through an attic or something, and, cleared down, rewarding creativity is what I'm saying. Is I like the idea of rewarding creativity.
And that's something I try to do, but as it is written, it gives you its clear indications of what can be done, but does not, at any point that I can see, it does not encourage you to try different things.
Right.
Although they had that point thing that
This is true.
The inspiration points.
which
Yeah.
I guess
But that-
if you wanted, you could have thrown that out
It
liberally.
is, but taking it literally, in the book itself, the role-playing and inspiration, which is on page 4, it says it's because that the DM should award it when players play to their character's personality traits. And that's when it happens.
So
Not
Bree
necessarily
should have
being
gotten one when
creative
she
or anything.
collapsed the entire cavern.
That's a
on
good
us.
point.
Yeah, there are a few mechanics that will be fun if you were running your own game. Inspiration points would be fun. Advantage, disadvantage, I think, can be used a lot more.
Yep.
We're looking at very mechanically, like I get advantage on this roll, but I think the player's handbook says, if the DM gets in a situation where he thinks the players would have advantage because they have higher ground or whatever, he lets them roll advantage. Or if he thinks that they would have a hard time for any reason, they can roll disadvantage.
And that's an important thing to note, that the set does not say that.
Right.
However, that kind of thing is in the beginning of every Dungeon Master guide they put out. It's probably in the beginning of the player's handbook, the printed one for this edition, but it's just not encouraged here. And again, I kind of agree with not putting that in, so the DM is not overwhelmed with how many cool ideas can I come up with and break the adventure.
Training wheels are good.
Yeah.
I think 2 improvements in this edition, or changes or simplifications that I don't want to say more casual fans, but people like me will appreciate. I think advantage, disadvantage is so much easier than what I know of as the Pathfinder mechanics. It's probably the 4th edition mechanics of.
Gosh, 4th edition, all the condition modifiers
Oh, the
is
condition
really
modifier-
what advantage takes over.
It really
for.
that took a lot of the fun out of that for me, is having to add 4 numbers to your roll. I just love advantage disadvantage mechanism. I think it's got a lot of potential, and I love what to me seems like a simplification of magic use. It's very intuitive. You get certain spells. If you want them to be more powerful, you cast them using a higher level spell slot, and you know exactly how many of those you have. And it's, to me, it's a very easy and intuitive way to be a magic user.
That's a good point. Like, I've always shied away from magic characters because I've been intimidated with how in 4th edition you had to do magic. I think I would be more inclined to play a magic character.
It's really very easy in the sense that, I have a spreadsheet that I have made as my spell book. And if you look, I literally put up it, because you guys know I don't remember the details well. I literally, on my spell page, have every spell. I decide which ones yellow is always prepared. Blue is I chose to prepare it for this day. But then up at the top, I have a box for my level 1 spell boxes and my level 2. And I just put an X in when I've used the box.
Yeah, so what he's saying is magic is so easy, you just need a laptop
just
and
need a
Microsoft Office, and boom, you got it.
But I mean,
but
it's, and
Magic is like,
I like it.
It's definitely
3.5
simplified.
It
was
is, yeah.
much more complicated than that. Like, if you're intimidated by 4th edition, 3.5,
I never would have played a magic character.
I don't think you would have. I don't think.
I mean,
Now-
Pathfinder's basically that, and I looked at the magic users, and I was like, I can't handle this right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're getting ready to wrap this one up here at just over half an hour. A general, thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thought. I think we all kind of agree it's a really good set. As far as getting people into role-playing games, is it a good set? Yes.
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 I
Definitely.
think we all agree with that.
And beyond it, Wizards, who has gotten a lot of criticism for a lot of things justifiably over the last 10 years, has put out what I think are agreeing is a good starter set.
Yes.
They put out a great player's handbook and what is universally being considered the best monster manual they've ever put out.
Very good.
So the beginning of 5th edition is really strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, with the exception of what I just picked on Kurt for having a laptop, for his own reference, mind you, everybody else is using what came with the set. We're using character sheets, blank pieces of paper, pencils, and dice. There is nothing extra needed to play this, which I think is a very useful thing to know. Buy that starter set on Amazon at the $11, or go pay $20 at your local gaming store, whatever it may be.
Support your
And
local stores.
Support your local stores, definitely. And I think it's a really great way to start. Anyone want to add anything else before we go?
I want to ask everyone, overall, on a scale of 1 to 10, what was your enjoyment level throughout the entire thing? Were there parts where you were just bored out of your mind? Were there parts where you're just like, I would give it an 8 overall.
I would give it a 9.
Mike?
7. It's a little mathy at times, and that's not a problem. But it's like compared to like Dungeon World. Dungeon World has no math.
You've gotten spoiled with that. So have I.
got spoiled. So it's probably better, but than a 7. But I would probably give it a 7.
Kurt?
Intellectually, I would give it an 8. In terms of how much I was enjoying it and wanting to play it again, I would give it a 9.
Very good. I would give it somewhere between 8 and 9 myself as well. So I think, overall, we agree this is well above average for a release to get into tabletop role-playing games. And I think that's going to wrap it up for this bonus podcast for the Dungeons & Dragons starter set. Remember to find us on iTunes. Hopefully you got this from iTunes, and we've got a 5-star rating by now. And I would encourage you to rate us, leave comments, visit us at adventuresfromtheshed.com.
Send us messages.
Google community. Send us messages. Mickey likes messages.
I
as
do.
much
I
as
love
she likes
messages.
beaver pelts.
I love beaver pelts.
I
that's
think she
gonna-
likes bonus penis better.
That's going to wrap it up for this session. Everybody say...
Beat us.
Penis.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.
You've heard our review of the play sessions for the D&D Starter Set. Now let your thoughts be known. Join us on our website at adventuresfromtheshed.com and comment in our Google community. A big thanks again to the AFTS cast, and a special thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us. The preceding podcast was brought to you by Shedcast. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com.